So Fincher directed this thing, Aaron Sorkin wrote the screenplay, and it's the Facebook origin story? Sold. Welcome back to the David Fincher series, ladies and gentlemen. We are getting closer and closer to the release of Mank. I'm having such a great time looking back at all of Fincher's old films to get myself hyped up for it. And today on the docket is what many consider to be their favorite Fincher film, The Social Network. As far as I'm concerned, one of the best written films of the last decade. Of course, written by Aaron Sorkin. Who would have thunk it? The film begins in the year 2003, where Harvard undergrad and computer genius Mark Zuckerberg, played by Jesse Eisenberg, begins work on a new concept that eventually turns into the global phenomenon known as Facebook. And 6 years later, he is one of the youngest billionaires ever. But Zuckerberg finds that his success leads to both personal and legal battles when he ends up on the receiving end of two lawsuits, one of which involves his former friend Eduardo Saverin, played by Andrew Garfield. So I've talked to various other cinephiles in anticipation for this binge of Fincher films, and a lot of people have stated that this film is their favorite of the bunch. I don't know if I'm gonna go that far, but for what it is, this is pretty damn good. And a lot of that not only has to do with Fincher's immaculate direction, which honestly, if you've been watching this entire playlist up to this point, that fact should be no surprise. Yep, that David Fincher sure knows how to make a good-looking film, doesn't he? And this is a very dialogue-heavy screenplay, and Aaron Sorkin is consistently finding ways to keep us engaged. This is arguably the best-written David Fincher film. If it's not his best-written, certainly the best script for a Fincher film since Fight Club, that's for sure. Now, the technicals are spot on. The editing is very fast-paced, which, again, should be no surprise, considering whose name is on this. But I also want to take a second to compliment the score for this movie, because I think it's one of the more underrated aspects of it. This score reminded me a lot of Mr. Robot. It feels very techno, but it always makes you feel like the wheels are spinning in this guy's mind. And that's the whole idea of a score to begin with. It's supposed to help the audience feel a certain mood of the film, or the certain mood of a character in this case. And there always seems to be an impatient urgency when those techno beats come surging in. Now, the performances are no surprise, spectacular. Jesse Eisenberg turns in what I still think is his career best performance as Mark Zuckerberg. He's extremely dialed in, not even just when he's coding, but he rattles off a lot of dialogue super fast at a breakneck speed. It's almost like he's a CPU himself. And that's not to say that he is. He still shows an excellent amount of emotional range here, but that's just what it made me think of. Speaking of emotional range, I gotta talk about Andrew Garfield for a second. He is so damn great in this film. A lot of people have actually said that this is the role that won him the role of Peter Parker in the inferior Spider-Man flicks, which we're certainly not going to talk about. I actually do remember when those Spider-Man movies were coming out, and everybody was saying, oh that's the guy from The Social Network playing Peter Parker. So in a sense, I feel like this film made Andrew Garfield super ultra famous. And all the better for it. He was excellent in here. The emotional toll that his friendship with Mark Zuckerberg has taken, all the arguments, all the betrayal. There is one scene in the Facebook office spaces closer to the end of the film that was so emotionally investing. And Garfield was the centerpiece of that whole exchange, and that really, really made me feel for his character. It honestly also kind of made me think that Zuckerberg was a lunatic for doing what he did there, but amazingly enough, I still kind of understand what Zuckerberg was doing there, and that's another amazing thing about this film. The motivations are certainly extremely clear. It is an emotional conundrum, that's for sure. Now, this movie also introduces us to Armie Hammer, who plays both Winklevoss twins, which honestly, on this rewatch going in, I completely forgot that he played both of them. And Armie Hammer is a very polarizing figure, to say the least. But I think this is actually a pretty underrated performance. I think he did really well showcasing both brothers and showcasing different personalities. Both are equally snooty, and I think Hammer does a great job with them. Lastly, if you want to talk about surprising performances, how about Justin Timberlake as Sean Parker? Man, oh man, was Timberlake good in this film. He may actually be my favorite part about this film. Yeah, the guy from NSYNC, Justin Timberlake. Who would have thunk it? Again, he's got a lot of dialogue to rattle off, but he is such a natural showman, a natural salesman. His monologues are so well written, and Timberlake plays the role as smarmy as they come. And he was so much fun to watch, and honestly, it's kind of relieving knowing that the guy from NSYNC turned in as good of a performance as he did. I mean, I really don't have a whole lot of issues with The Social Network. I mean, keep in mind, it was not nominated for a bunch of awards for nothing. But I should mention one last thing that a lot of people, including Mark Zuckerberg himself, have issues with. And you guys probably know where I'm going with this. We're going to talk about how historically accurate this film is. Now, the screenplay I should mention is actually based off of a book called The Accidental Billionaires. So even though this film is based off of true events, I understand when people say, take all this with a grain of salt. And that's the main criticism I often see and hear and read about this film, and honestly, I can't really argue with that too much. If it's too distracting for you, that's totally fine. But the thing is, this film is just so riveting. It's so cleverly written, and it's such an emotionally investing story that I honestly didn't really care how historically inaccurate it was. There was not one time I wanted to take my eyes off this screen, so I'm not going to downgrade this film for its alleged historical inaccuracy. I think if you were to nitpick and make this film better, I kind of wish that Mark Zuckerberg himself was brought on as a creative consultant. I think that could have made for an even more riveting film. But for what it is, it's one of Fincher's most acclaimed films for a reason. In my opinion, it's one of its best, deservedly so. I think it deserves every bit of an A+. If you haven't seen this film, it is a really fascinating dive into one man's psyche, and it's a really fascinating dive into how a phenomenon was created and the friendships that were broken along the way, and a movie, ironically enough, all about friendships. Definitely seek this one out if you haven't, you won't regret it. And of course, I'm getting so close to the release of Mank, guys. I've got 2 more retro Fincher films to look at. First of the 2 is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, so keep an eye out for that review coming out very soon. But what do you guys think of The Social Network? Have you seen it? Have you not? I'd love to discuss this film further with you guys down in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a big fat thumbs up if you liked it. Also, if you're enjoying all of my content so far, if you want to continue discussing cinema with me, please consider hitting that subscribe button down below as hard as you possibly can, so that way you guys can stay in the loop anytime I upload a new video over here. You guys are awesome, seriously. Thank you all so much for tuning in, as always. Thank you for your support of the channel so far also. It really does mean the world. Look out for more exciting content hitting the channel very soon, as always. With all that being said, back talk, commence.